So our most popular rod by far over the last 12 months or so is the Apia Foojin RS Art Magic. This is a rod that's obviously very dear to my heart, considering we actually had so much to do with the development and the design of it. We always sort of every year I see the Japanese catalogues wishing that there's this certain style of rod in there. And as great as they all are, there's always this little gap in my mind as to what we really need to cover so many of the uses that people like me, just people that want one rod to do as much as possible with. That specific rod is so often missing. So I was speaking to Apia and they agreed luckily to help me design a rod that would really suit us, our fishing, especially my own obviously, but then I know that there's so many people through being in our shop over the years that are actually just like me. So the Art Magic is the result. It took quite a while in development. I mean, it was numbers of, I think we're probably stretching into almost more than a year rather than just months, but eventually the design was a little bit admittedly of a mixture of ideas between myself and their lead designer, who's added specific little details like the joint, for example, which I'm sure we'll mention in a minute. But it's the overall rod has ended up being something that I feel I can quite happily fish very light on. As much as it's actually a relatively powerful rod, I've never had a more powerful rod like this that also fishes 3 grams or less, as I have done in the estuary. And that's not even just a jig head weight, for example. This is literally 3 grams combined lure and jig head weight. And admittedly on a very fine line, I'm on sort of 0.8 PE braided main lines to do that. But on a calm day, I feel like I have no disadvantage over the many shorter, lighter rods that we've taken out to trial over the years in exactly those scenarios. And every time I go back to it, when we are fishing on the estuary in particular, I'm reminded actually how good the rod is at that style of fishing. So it's always missed whenever I'm lending mine to one of the guys or Henry Gilby or whoever. So it's great that eventually, when obviously the range was properly produced, when we got past the prototype stage, that now other people can obviously get to see it too. And feedback has been amazing, which is I'm just so grateful for, because there was every possibility that people would be doubtful and really negative about the rod. So because it is a little bit different, admittedly, it's got a relatively light tip for a rod that has so much power lower down. It's almost a rod where we've badged it actually as a 90 ml plus, because it's almost a combination of two, and it's so tricky to really pin exactly where it sits in the scheme compared to other rods. It's almost what you could consider being rated at 36 grams, for example. It's an Apia, so it will fish 36 grams, but it's almost easiest for me to explain this differentiation between tip and butt by saying that you can imagine it almost being a rod that has a 40 gram butt, but with a 30 gram tip. It's that kind of design in a way. It's a little bit more complex than that, but it's a rod that manages, because of those features, to be light when you need it to, but also have all the power in the butt should the wind get up or the swell pick up on any given day, to make sure that if you are a person, again, like me, that wants to really just take one rod to cover as much of your fishing as possible, then it's exactly what it does. And it does it so well as well, which is, again, a relief really, once we got through the design and sort of process of it. So it's ended up, like I say, with a lot of great feedback. It's rated technically, I think in the end we settled on something like sort of 5 to 36 we did put on the end. It's, like I say, with all rods, a guide as such, and you don't ever want to push these numbers up going too much above what they say. But again, the benefit of it being an Apia rod is that they're just so much more robust, to be honest, than so many other rod brands that we sell. They're such high quality builds that the carbons they use and what they do, I don't know the exact science of what they do with the carbons, but in terms of reliability, I've never known a brand that even touches Apia in terms of just how reliable they are. And again, something that I just particularly want in rods, and having been a shopkeeper for so long as well, the worst thing for me, and I just feel so terrible, is when people break rods, because ultimately I'm the person that sold them the rod, and very often they'll very much, depending on what our relationship is like, they can assume that it's my fault if their rod is broken, which I always feel a level of guilt about. So having a brand like this and a range like this just provides me with the safety and the security that I can confidently say to people that, I mean, like, touch wood always obviously, but that you won't have problems with one of these rods. Apias are never particularly the lightest rods on paper, but they make up for it more than anything with just how reliable they are. Again, when you're comparing them with other rods, let's say the likes of the Art Magic, is actually hard to compare, but when you're comparing Apia rods with other rods, because they will genuinely cast what they say they will, it's very difficult to compare because you have so many Japanese rods that could say 36 grams, for example, but might struggle realistically once they get up over about 30. So you might look at an Apia rod on paper that's rated at 36 grams next to another rod for another brand rated at 36 grams. The Apia will be 10 grams heavier, let's say, but it's also hugely more powerful. So naturally it's going to weigh a little bit more. The Apia reel seats, again, this is very Apia focused almost, this video obviously, but the Art Magic is such a unique rod within that range in terms of action, but also the Apia grips are just the nicest I've ever used, I think, being this sort of lockdown type, the sort of EVA sections, the way that it's designed, it really sort of molds to your hands. So there's nothing nothing suddenly that I dislike about this rod at all. It's just done everything I've ever asked of it and more, covers a range beyond anything of any other rod that I've used before. So we'll just jump onto a few of the features of the Art Magic that make it a little bit more unique than others. If we start at the tip, I mentioned that it's got a slightly lighter tip than some. It's very fast action. You can sort of see how it comes from sort of, I think, what is a 1.7mm tip all the way through. Within the sort of top four or five guides there, it quite quickly is stiffening up by them. As it comes down, it does then actually, with this special joint that it's got, it's basically a put-in joint. So rather than the tip going over the butt, the tip goes into the butt, which means we get this kind of step in power. It's not noticeable when you see the bend of the rod, but actually you get a lighter, more sensitive tip up here, or at least a more forgiving tip for either casting lighter lures or just generally feeling lighter things on the whole. To actually then stepping up to the joint where you've then got where your power really kicks in through this middle section. But it's, even though it is a step, it's not, because it's an Apia rod with the nano joint that they've got, it does blend in really nicely, so you don't notice this step in power even though it's actually there. The guides themselves, you've got Fuji SiCs, the stainless frames, so just high quality Fuji components all the way through, obviously. Thank you again to anybody that's already tried and invested in these rods. It has been an amazing experience just getting so much positive feedback and make it all worthwhile, really. If you'd like to see more of them, they are on our website, or they are actually available in a number of stockists around the UK as well. So see if you can get your hands on one and see what you think. It's only really in the fishing that the Apia rods really show themselves and just how versatile they are, but see if you can get down and see one at some point soon.